First question is a two-parter. First from Mo Love. What is realistically possible for offseason moves considering the CBA, other teams' unwillingness to take on underperforming contracts, and everyone's desire for two-way players? When you consider who you would like to return, Luka, AR, Braun, Rui, Smart, how much optionality, in all caps, does the front office have to get talent and not give up meaningful pieces? And then the second one is from Kolst. How likely do you think it is that the Lakers are a cap space team at all? The way I see it, if LeBron is coming back, some combination of that plus Rui, Smart, Ayton, Kennard, and AR's cap hold is going to eat up our entire cap. And we should be thinking more about who is available for the MLE and minimums. All right, let's dig into everybody's favorite current topic, which is the offseason and LA's various pathways to improving the roster. There's a ton of optionality this summer for LA. The key will be actualizing that optionality and turning the optionality into action and into results and into a better roster going into the 2026-27 season. For simplicity's sake, I want to walk through the Lakers cap situation and then talk through a couple of the options here that will determine what LA is able to ultimately do. So first, let's look at the guys who are projected to be on the roster. This is a rough projection. They could technically dump some of these guys, which I will touch on. One of these guys has a player option. He could potentially opt out. One of these players has a partially guaranteed contract. They could waive that player. So, but let's just take a rough look at this here. So Luka Doncic on the books for $49.5 million. Vando on the books for $12.4 million. DeAndre Ayton, $8.1 million player option. As of right now, I'm leaning toward him opting in, but time will tell if that's the case. But for now, let's put him on the books at 8.1. Jake LaRavia, $6 million. Dalton Connect, 4.2. Bronny James, 2.3, but he has a $1.2 million guarantee on that. So if you were to waive Bronny, you'd save about $1.1 million, and that 1.2 would be on your cap sheet. Adu, $2.2 million. And then I have it here for the number 25 pick. Last year, the number 25 pick was Jace Richardson to the Magic. He made just under $3 million, $2.98 million. So I'm putting the same salary. Technically, I think it'll be a little bit higher, maybe like into the low threes. But for simplicity's sake, let's just keep it at the same. If you add up Luka, Vando, DA, Jake, Dalton, Bronny, Adu, and the number 25 pick, that gets you to 8 players on the roster, and that is a total of $87,664,159. But Lakers are at an incomplete roster, so you have to add in, for our purpose here, we will be putting Austin Reeves and Jackson Hayes on the books with their respective cap holds. Austin's cap hold is projected to be $20.9 million. Jackson's cap hold is projected to be $4.5 million. So you add those two guys in, and those are, with Austin, that's below the contract he's going to get. With Jackson, that's in the vicinity, maybe a little low, but around where he's going to be. So you add those two guys in. Now the Lakers have 10 players under contract. Then, because they are under the league minimum of 12, they get 2 empty roster charges added to their cap sheet. So if you are under 12 players, for every player you are under 12, you're going to be charged $1.36 million that's projected for next season. And so you add in the 8 players officially under contract, you add in the cap holds of Austin Reeves and Jackson Hayes, and then you add the 2 empty roster charges, and the Lakers get to $115,774,640. Now, let's take a step back. The projected cap actually dropped back in March from projected to be $166 million to $165 million. So the cap is coming in a little bit lower. So if you look at the math there of $165 million for the cap, and we don't know the official number yet, but it's going to be in that ballpark, minus $115.7 million, that gets you to $49,225,360. So the Lakers, if they only have the guys on the books that they're projected to have, plus the number 25 pick, plus they keep the cap holds of Austin and Jackson, and then they have the 2 empty roster charges. They'd have about $49.2 million to play with. Now, there's a lot of nuance and contingency within this, right? Because in this scenario, I am declining the team option of Nick Smith Jr., which I think that's how that's going to play out, but obviously the Lakers could keep him. I am putting DeAndre Ayton on the books with his $8.1 million player option, but he could opt out, and that would give the Lakers an additional 8.1 if they rescind the rights. There'd be a cap hold with DA on their sheet, so they'd have to rescind the rights to get him completely off the books. You also have the partial guarantee with Bronny and his contract, and then that's before mentioning the possibility of LA trade dumping Vando or Jake or Dalton or some combination of those guys to create some additional flexibility. But the most straightforward path right now is like these guys are on the roster and Austin and Jackson and their cap holds and the empty roster charges. Now, let's look at the cap holds here, because the cap holds are where things get a little tricky. LeBron's cap hold, for example, is $59.5 million. So as long as the Lakers have not rescinded the rights to LeBron, he will be on the books for $59.5 million. Rui is at $27.4 million. Austin, as aforementioned, is at 20.9. Luke is at 13.2. Jackson's at 4.5. And then Marcus is at 6.2 if he opts out. He has a player option. I think he will opt out. I would be shocked if Marcus does not make double-digit millions next season. So if you take the LeBron, Rui, Luke, and Marcus cap holds, and we're putting Austin and Jackson to the side because they're already on the cap sheet, you add up those 4 players and their cap holds, you get $106.3 million. And if you add that to LA's salary projection at this point, like you would take away 2.7 from the empty roster charges, which would bring them down to 113, and then you add in those cap holds of 106, you're at $219 million, which means you are $3 million under the second apron. And so at that point, you would have 14 players under contract. You'd be about $3 million under the second apron, and LA could maybe sign a minimum player depending on their terms of service. Otherwise, they just would be standing pat with 14 players. Now, just because they're at the $219 million doesn't mean they're going to stay at the $219 million, because I'd be shocked if LeBron is making $59.5 million from the Lakers next season. I would be shocked if Rui's making 27.4. So those two alone, if we knock down Rui to a range of 16 to 20 million, maybe let's say 16 to 18 million, and then LeBron is, I've stated why I think LeBron is going to have to take a lot less, or at least for what the Lakers' ambitions are this offseason. But let's just say that the middle ground here is like $40 million for LeBron. If you have LeBron at 40, Rui at 18, even if you rescind the rights to Luke and Marcus, it's tricky because Marcus, the starting salary for Marcus is $6.2 million. That cap hold would be the most the Lakers can offer him without using cap space or an exception. So Marcus he's not going to opt out of his current contract to then re-sign at $6.1 million. It would have to be more than that. So I think Marcus is going to be a guy they have to use either cap space or an exception on. But just with LeBron and Rui, even if you get rid of Luke, just LeBron and Rui, again, for argument's sake, that's $58 million. But even if you knock LeBron to $30 million, that's still $48 million, which I mentioned the cap number right now at 49.3. Like, you are right there basically using all of your cap space on LeBron and Rui. That's to say nothing of Marcus. So in this instance, you can't even use cap space on Marcus. You'd have to use the room exception, which is about $9.3 million. And that might be low for Marcus, in my opinion. And you'd be losing Luke. So you could keep LeBron, you could keep Rui, you could keep Marcus, but you're at that point basically used all your cap space. Then you'd be going over the cap with re-signing Austin, re-signing Jackson, and then you would have 13 players under contract and have some room to add another minimum guy. And then you'd be at 14. But point being with all of this is like the cap space dries up quickly. And so the Lakers could operate above the cap. You could just re-sign LeBron to some number 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, whatever the number is. You could re-sign Rui somewhere between 15 to 20. You could even keep Luke. I think he'd probably take a pay cut on the 13.2, but somewhere in the $8 to $10 million range. And then Marcus, you could use the non-taxpayer mid-level exception on and retain him. But again, you are now basically, you're over the cap because now you're also going to re-sign Austin above the cap. You're over the cap, and the one move you're making technically outside of minimum guys is re-signing Marcus for the non-taxpayer. So, and even if you lose Luke, you still don't have cap space, or the most you could offer Marcus in that scenario is still 6.2. So if Marcus is looking for 10 plus million, the only two ways the Lakers can retain him are by using cap space or by using the non-taxpayer MLE on him. And either way, that is limiting their ability to, like in the cap space route, that's limiting their ability to add two players within that cap space route. And then the non-taxpayer MLE route, maybe he doesn't take the full thing, but even then, you got at most like a few million to play with for other guys. And so you run out of optionality pretty quickly. And so the Lakers kind of have like two paths here where they can run it back to a degree with LeBron and Rui and Luke and Marcus, or three of those four, and then use the non-taxpayer MLE and minimums to fill out the rest of the roster. Or they could be a cap space team, but to be a cap space team, LeBron either has to take a massive discount or leave, or they have to, he still probably has to take some sort of discount if they keep him. But then you're also losing Luke at a minimum and potentially Rui or Marcus, depending on where their numbers come in. And honestly, if Rui's commanding 18 to 20 million compared to Marcus at 10 to 12, I already have been on the side of I would prefer to keep Marcus over Rui, and I think the Lakers should prioritize him more and will. But if it's like Marcus at 10 versus Rui at 18, I think that's a no-brainer of I'd rather have the extra $8 million in flexibility to potentially add another above minimum contract, or maybe that keeps Luke, right? Like, would you rather have Marcus and Luke, Marcus for 10, Luke for 8, and that's 18 million versus Rui at 18? I would rather have Marcus and Luke. So the Lakers are going to have some tough decisions here. I do see, the more I look at their cap situation, it does feel like Rui or Marcus is going to become a choice at some point, and it's going to be difficult to keep both those guys. Now, the giant caveat here is if LeBron retires or if LeBron leaves, then they have a lot more space to play with. And again, if you go back to that $49.2 million, if you could re-sign Rui at 18, Marcus at 12, that's 30, and you still have another $19.2 million to play with. But we haven't even talked about, like, we're just dipping our toes in the water here. We haven't even talked about restricted free agency and if you make an offer for Walker Kessler, because again, if you go Kessler, Peyton Watson, Jalen Duren, Tari Eason, I mean, that's taken a decent chunk out of that $49 million. That's to say nothing of, again, potentially resigning LeBron, Rui, and Marcus. And I know there's going to be a ton of questions about the rights and so just to be clear, you can rescind the rights to a player and still retain them. Just because you rescind the rights doesn't mean that player is gone. It just means the rights are, like, for example, with Austin, the Lakers are able to keep Austin on that $20.9 million cap hold because of his bird rights. And then they're able to go above the cap and sign him to an even greater number. So it's a similar thing with some of these guys where you keep them on the cap hold. You can agree to contracts immediately at the start of free agency and then reduce those numbers. But again, I talked through that exercise a little bit ago. It's like, even if you get LeBron to reduce from 59.5 to 40 or even 30, and you get Rui to go from 27.4 to 18, we're still talking about at least $48 million combined with those two, if not 58. So then you're operating above the cap. And that's where the second question comes in of looking at MLE and minimum guys. Like, I've done some of that. I think there's a chance Mitchell Robinson could be an MLE guy. He might make more than that, but you also have to think about, like, I mean, the Knicks could pay him more than that, but if, it's Brooklyn or Chicago, again, there's a couple of teams that, depending on what they do, could create some cap space, but maybe Mitchell Robinson is a candidate for that. Robert Williams, maybe you could split the part of the non-taxpayer mid-level exception with Robert Williams and another player. And the one thing I haven't really touched on here that much is the Lakers can obviously trade or trade dump Vando, Jake, and DK. But even if, let's just say it's like you dump Vando and DK, that is $16.6 million coming off the books. So that 49.2 jumps up to 65.8. That sounds great. But again, if you are getting an RFA in this case, let's say you're getting Walker Kessler or Peyton Watson for $32 million. Immediately that's half your cap space gone. And now you have $32 million to retain some combination of LeBron, Rui, Luke, and Marcus. You could probably keep two of those, like two of the non-LeBron guys, or maybe LeBron plus one of the other guys. But like you're pretty much losing two players at least there, if not three. And then that's your team. And so if like the Lakers come into next season, let's just say it's like LeBron plus Watson or LeBron plus Kessler, you have upgraded the starting group, right? You've replaced Marcus or DA with a better player, and that has made the starting group better. However, if it comes at the cost of Rui and Luke, well, those are your two best shooters and two key bench guys for you. If it's Luke and Marcus, those are also two key bench guys now, and now you got to replace a couple backcourt pieces. Or if it's Rui and Marcus, like that was your fourth and fifth best players this season. So I think the goal is obviously to retain as much of the core, as much of the primary rotation as possible, and add to it. But as we talk through different scenarios here, it does get pretty complicated. And I know that the Lakers are going to try to dump Vando and DK, and that might cost them a first round pick. I don't see anyone just taking on Vando's 25 plus million over the next 2 years without getting some sort of asset for that. So, I mean, that's its own conversation of what you have to attach to get off those guys. The 16.6 could just be a part of keeping LeBron, Rui, Luke, and Marcus. Now, I think Luke is probably the casualty here, among those four. So you'll put him to the side. But if you do get that to the 65, even if LeBron goes down to, let's just say 25 for argument's sake, Rui at 18, that's 43. Marcus at 12, that's 55. Now you got $10 million left over. So it's going to be really interesting to see how LA navigates this. And do they want to be a cap space team? Do they want to be an above the cap team? If you're an over the cap team, you do have access to that non-taxpayer MLE, which is more than the 9.3 exception that you would get being a cap team. But then you're basically running it back and adding one player. Even if you are flipping some of this money, like the 16 point, like you would probably need the 16.6 plus DA opting out. Then that would be enough for now you're at like 24 plus, where that starts to be a chunk where you could find, you could acquire somebody or do something with that. But like, for example, 16.6 isn't even enough to acquire Lou Dort into that additional space, right? So the Lakers are just going to have a ton of tough decisions to make. And that's why, again, when we talk about LeBron, I think that number is probably going to have to be in that 20 to 25. If it's any higher, at some point, it's really difficult to add to the roster. Even if you are shedding salary on top of that, then they're going to have to decide how they feel about Rui, Marcus, and Luke, and what are the numbers they would want those guys back at. How many of those guys do they want back? And then depending on where they're at, they could have some cap space or they could be above the cap. And I will touch on this in more depth and go through each specific scenario in the coming days and weeks. But I wanted to give you a bit of an overview where, you just quickly run out of money here as the Lakers. And it's really going to be like some combination of probably losing some of these key guys plus shedding salary to really get the flexibility. The Lakers are going to have to get creative and be very intentional with how they approach all this.